The sun was setting over the jagged hills of Lerna, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape. Alexios, a young archaeologist, stood at the entrance of a massive dark cave, clutching his lantern. His heart raced with excitement and fear. He had been searching for this place for years, the fabled cave of the Hydra, where the monstrous serpent of legend had once terrorized the land. The locals had warned him not to go, but he didn't believe in the old stories. The Hydra was long dead, slain by Heracles centuries ago, its myth only surviving in whispered tales. But now, standing at the mouth of the cave, Alexios couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the shadows themselves were alive. The cave exhaled a damp, foul-smelling wind, and Alexios hesitated, staring into the yawning darkness. But he had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, the light from his lantern flickering against the damp stone walls. The air inside was heavy and cold, filled with the scent of rot. As he descended deeper into the cave, the walls seemed to close in around him, narrowing into a suffocating tunnel. The sound of his footsteps echoed unnaturally, and every now and then he swore he could hear the faint hiss of something moving. He shook his head. It was just his imagination. But then he heard it again, a low, rumbling hiss, distant but growing louder. Alexios froze, holding his breath. The sound grew, slithering through the dark, a chorus of whispers and hisses, like the breathing of 1,000 serpents. His skin crawled, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He continued forward, heart pounding in his chest. As he rounded a corner, his lantern flickered, illuminating a vast underground chamber. The ceiling loomed high above, covered in stalactites dripping with moisture. The floor was littered with bones, ancient and yellowed, some human, others too twisted and deformed to identify. In the center of the chamber, something enormous stirred. Alexios's breath caught in his throat. There, coiled in the shadows, was the Hydra. Its massive serpentine body shifted in the darkness, scales glinting in the faint light of his lantern. Dozens of heads, each more grotesque than the last, rose from the writhing mass. The eyes of the Hydra glowed a sickly yellow, each one locking onto him with a predatory hunger. The stories had been wrong. The Hydra wasn't dead. It had been waiting. Alexios took a step back, his heart hammering in his chest, but the Hydra moved faster. One of its heads darted forward with terrifying speed, snapping its fangs inches from his face. He stumbled, dropping the lantern, which shattered on the stone floor, plunging the chamber into total darkness. In the blackness, the sound of slithering filled his ears, growing louder and more frantic. The Hydra was moving now, hissing, its many heads writhing as they closed in on him. He could feel the hot breath of the creature on his neck, hear the soft scrape of its scales on the stone. Blindly, Alexios reached out, his fingers brushing against the jagged wall of the cave. He scrambled, trying to climb, trying to escape, but the Hydra was everywhere. Its heads circled him, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their tongues flickering out to taste the air. He could feel the heat of the creature all around him, its presence suffocating. The hissing grew deafening, and then pain. Searing, burning pain as one of the Hydra's heads sank its fangs into his leg. Alexios screamed, kicking wildly, but another head clamped down on his arm, then another on his back. He could feel the venom coursing through his veins, burning like fire. His vision blurred, and the world spun as the Hydra began to drag him deeper into the cave, its many heads fighting over him, tearing at his flesh. As he slipped into unconsciousness, his final thought was a horrific realization. The Hydra wasn't just a legend. It was real, It had survived for centuries, feeding on those foolish enough to seek it out. And now it had found a new victim. The next morning, a search party arrived at the cave, but there was no sign of Alexios, only the shattered remnants of his lantern and the faint smell of rot. The villagers shook their heads, knowing what had happened. The Hydra always claimed its prey. Far beneath the earth, in the depths of the cave, the Hydra coiled once more around its lair, sated but ever watchful, waiting for the next soul to wander into the dark.